Eddie is a struggling writer trying to make it in New York. Lately, his life has been anything but glamorous. For the past few months, he's been surviving off an advance for a book he hasn't finished, along with some financial help from his girlfriend. The problem is, Eddie hasn't written a single meaningful word. Every time he tries, the result's always the same: write, delete, give up. Most of his days are spent drinking at bars or lazing around in his messy apartment. Unable to stand the stagnation any longer, Eddie's fiancée, Lindy, finally decided to end their relationship. With Eddie's career going nowhere, Lindy felt she couldn't keep supporting him when he showed no signs of change. Even though Eddie told her he loved her and wanted to spend his life with her, Lindy still left, leaving him in an even deeper emptiness. On his way home, Eddie ran into Vernon, the brother of his ex-wife, Melissa. Eddie used to know Vernon as a reckless drunk and troublemaker. But this time, Vernon seemed different. He invited Eddie to a bar for a drink, just to catch up on life. Vernon shared that Melissa had remarried and now had 2 kids. Meanwhile, Eddie admitted that he was trying to write a book, but was struggling even to get started. Seeing Eddie's frustration, Vernon offered an unexpected solution. He pulled out a small pill and offered it to Eddie. At first, Eddie flat out refused, assuming Vernon was still involved in the same shady world as before. But Vernon insisted that the pill was legal, FDA approved, and about to hit the market. He claimed it could unlock the brain's receptors and help someone use their full cognitive potential. Though Eddie remained skeptical, curiosity started creeping in. Vernon got an urgent call and had to leave. Before heading out, he handed Eddie his business card, saying they could meet again sometime. He even mentioned that the pill was worth $800 per tablet, but Eddie still wasn't tempted. Later, on his way back to his apartment, Eddie felt like he had hit rock bottom. Feeling like he had nothing left to lose, he finally decided to take the pill. When he arrived at his apartment, he ran into his landlord's wife, who immediately started yelling at him for being late on rent. She wasn't just angry, she belittled him, saying he'd never make it and would end up homeless. But as the pill started to kick in, Eddie's world shifted. Her voice became muffled. His mind felt sharper, and something strange began to happen. Eddie caught a glimpse of the woman's bag and noticed a law book inside. Something suddenly felt off. Calmly, he asked if she was in law school, which startled her because he seemed to know something he wasn't supposed to. Eddie realized he had seen that book years ago in college, and suddenly he could recall every detail. Everything he had ever read, seen, or heard in his life came back with incredible clarity. With confidence, he suggested a better book for her assignment and gave her some highly useful tips. The woman, who had been furious just moments ago, was now impressed by Eddie's sudden vast and deep knowledge. Their conversation continued, and eventually they ended up spending the night together. When Eddie woke up the next morning, he felt different. He was amazed at how much knowledge he could now access effortlessly. All the scattered information in his mind felt organized, as if the pill had unlocked a warehouse of memories that had been sealed away. Documentaries, books, movies, commercials, everything was now part of his newfound awareness. Feeling energized, Eddie returned to his messy apartment. Without hesitation, he started cleaning everything up, then sat down at his computer and began writing. Inspiration flowed effortlessly, and by the end of the day, he had finished a 90-page manuscript. He now realized that his life had just changed, and this was only the beginning. NZT didn't just give him knowledge, it ignited a drive within him. The next day, Eddie started feeling the effects of the drug wearing off, so he decided to take his manuscript to his editor. Though his editor was a bit skeptical, he still took the time to read Eddie's work. When Eddie got home, he checked his voicemail and heard glowing praise from the editor. Shocked and relieved, he knew he needed more NZT. Without hesitation, he headed straight to Vernon's apartment. As soon as he arrived, Vernon immediately knew what Eddie was there for. Eddie noticed Vernon's face was covered in bruises and scratches and asked what had happened, but Vernon avoided answering. Eventually, Vernon admitted that he had lied about NZT being FDA approved, but Eddie still wanted more. Vernon then asked Eddie to do a few tasks for him, and Eddie agreed right away, thinking it was the only way to get more NZT. When Eddie returned to Vernon's apartment, he was shocked to find the door broken and wide open. As he stepped inside, he saw that the place had been ransacked, and Vernon was lying lifeless on the couch with a gunshot wound to the head. Panicked, Eddie rushed to call the police, but quickly realized he needed to find the NZT before they arrived. He searched the apartment and eventually found a stash of NZT pills, along with Vernon's client list and a pile of cash. Suddenly, the police arrived and arrested him. At the station, Eddie was interrogated, and right at that moment, he got a call from Melissa. The police told him they would contact him again, then let him go home. As soon as he got back, Eddie took another NZT pill, and in an instant, his creativity started flowing again. With Vernon's money, Eddie got a haircut and bought sharper-looking clothes. He started working out regularly, and within just 4 days, he finished writing his book. On top of that, he learned to play the piano in 3 days and realized he could pick up any language just by listening. Eddie grew more confident and charismatic, impressing everyone with his newfound skills. His shyness disappeared, and he started feeling like he could achieve anything he set his mind to. Then one day, he suddenly knew what he had to do next. Eddie decided to try his luck in the stock market. He met Kevin, a Wall Street broker, who became his gateway into the world of trading. With the help of NZT, Eddie started reading about stocks and studying the market in detail. In no time, he managed to turn the remaining $800 of Vernon's money into $2,000 in a single day. The next day, Eddie's account had already skyrocketed to $7,500. However, he knew that if he wanted to keep growing, he needed more money. So he decided to borrow from a loan shark named Kennedy. Kennedy agreed, but warned him that payment had to be made on time, or there would be serious consequences. Eddie accepted the challenge, confident that he could pay off the debt quickly. The next day, he returned to Kevin's brokerage firm and started buying and selling stocks. Within just 2 weeks, Eddie's account had exploded to over $2 million. Word of his success spread quickly, and soon after, Kevin called Eddie with news that a major Wall Street tycoon wanted to meet him. That night, Eddie had dinner with Lindy and told her how his life was starting to turn around. Lindy looked impressed and proud of the changes in him. Eddie revealed that he had just received a warning and decided to turn his life around. Over the next few days, they started reconnecting, and Lindy told Eddie that she wanted to be with him again. As they talked about starting fresh, Eddie felt something was off. He noticed a man watching from a distance. That night, Eddie hoped to see the man again as he looked out the window, but there was nothing there. Lindy, who was lying in bed, asked Eddie to join her, but suddenly he found himself standing in the hallway. He had no memory of how he got there. Lindy called him back to have dinner together. The next day, Kevin accompanied Eddie to an important meeting with a Wall Street giant. Kevin looked nervous, but Eddie assured him that everything would go smoothly. Carl, a Wall Street legend, finally arrived, and the meeting began. Carl's associates were suspicious of Eddie's rapid success and questioned him, suspecting it might be a scam. However, Eddie remained calm, answered intelligently, and impressed Carl. By the end of the meeting, Carl handed Eddie a stack of documents about his companies, asking him to analyze them. Eddie opened the documents and quickly realized that Carl was planning a massive merger with a competing company. Carl was amazed at how fast Eddie caught on, and he offered him the opportunity to restructure the deal. They agreed to meet again the next day. After that, Eddie left Carl's limousine, but instead of going home, he started walking, wanting to absorb as much information as possible. Without realizing it, he began feeling disoriented, finding himself in random places around the city without knowing how he got there. He ended up at several parties and nightclubs, meeting different women, unaware that the stranger he had seen earlier was following him. After leaving a hotel, Eddie headed to the subway, where he got into a fight with a group of criminals. The NZT helped him recall every martial arts technique, action movie scene, and survival documentary he had ever watched. With this knowledge, he managed to take down the criminals on his own. However, Eddie eventually woke up on the Brooklyn Bridge with no memory of the last 18 hours. He decided to stop taking NZT, afraid of losing more of his memories. The next day, Eddie struggled to process the data Carl had sent him. Kevin called him, urging him not to cancel the meeting with Carl, warning that this might be his only chance. However, during the meeting, Eddie felt unfocused and dizzy because he hadn't taken NZT. Carl noticed the change in Eddie and asked about Atwood, the businessman Eddie was supposed to be working with. Eddie seemed lost, distracted by a news report about a woman found dead in a hotel, the same woman he had been with the night before. Eddie completely lost focus during the meeting and ran out to throw up, feeling extremely sick and overwhelmed with guilt. In his confusion, he wondered if he had killed someone. At home, Eddie got a call from Melissa, who told him about Vernon's death. They agreed to meet. One day at the park, Eddie was going through Vernon's notebook. He called the clients listed in it and was shocked to hear that many of them had died due to the side effects of NZT. As he listened, Eddie suddenly realized he was hearing his own voice on the phone and saw the man who had been following him. Without hesitation, Eddie took off running, dodging speeding vehicles and jumping into a taxi to meet Melissa. When they met, Melissa revealed that she had also taken NZT at one point, but stopped after experiencing extreme mental exhaustion. She urged Eddie to quit taking the pills, warning him to reduce the dosage gradually to avoid severe side effects. Not long after, Eddie encountered Gennady, who suddenly attacked him and demanded payment. In the chaos, Eddie accidentally dropped some NZT pills, which Gennady immediately swallowed, thinking they were regular drugs. Afterward, they went to the bank, and Eddie gave him the money. Gennady commented that the pill made him feel incredible and planned to take more. Eddie then headed to Lindy's office, but after meeting her, he passed out. When he woke up, he told Lindy everything, and she eventually agreed to help him get more pills. After retrieving the remaining NZT, Lindy noticed the man following her. Terrified, she ran into a park where two men tried to help her but were stabbed by the man chasing her. Lindy then called Eddie, and he suggested that she take a pill as well. As soon as she did, she felt stronger and was able to fight off the man, even using a child's ice skate to injure him before escaping. The next day, Lindy started worrying that the pill had changed her. Eddie promised he would stop taking it once he had enough money. On the street, Eddie saw Gennady again, who was still demanding more pills. Realizing that Gennady wouldn't stop, Eddie decided to hire 2 bodyguards for his own safety. Eddie then met with Carl again, apologized for his mistakes, and was assigned to mediate a major merger between Carl and Atwood. Eddie discovered that he could prevent blackouts by getting enough sleep, staying hydrated, and taking high doses of NZT. He also designed special clothing to hide his NZT pills and hired a chemist to reverse engineer them so he could have better control over their effects. One day, a detective informed Eddie that he was now a suspect in the death of a model, forcing him to hire a lawyer who helped him secure temporary freedom. Eddie then met with Carl and Atwood and noticed how poor Atwood's health had become. Returning to his hotel, Eddie found it trashed and decided to buy a penthouse with tighter security. One day, Eddie ran into Gennady again, this time accompanied by his bodyguards. Gennady demanded 20 more NZT pills and threatened Eddie with the story about the model's death. The next day, Eddie prepared to handle his business with Atwood, but when he arrived, Atwood's assistant informed him that Atwood had been hospitalized. Eddie then realized that the driver taking Atwood's assistant was the same man who had been following him all along. Eddie went to the police station with his lawyer, who managed to clear him of all suspicion. At Carl's office, Eddie learned that Atwood had fallen into a coma, and to make matters worse, he discovered that his entire NZT stash was missing. Unexpectedly, Eddie received a package containing the severed hand of one of his bodyguards. Shortly after, Eddie heard loud knocking on his door. Just as he was about to open it, Gennady and his men burst in. Trapped with no way out, Eddie stepped onto the balcony, considering jumping to escape danger. As his foot slipped, Eddie nearly fell but managed to catch himself. At the same time, his mind raced, trying to remember if he had left behind a single NZT pill. Suddenly, his memory flashed to an old tin container he had stashed away, and he began searching through his belongings. After a few moments, he finally found it. But just as Eddie was about to grab the pill, Gennady burst in. Panicked, Eddie fell and stumbled over a box, losing the pill he had just found. Gennady's men didn't hold back. They immediately attacked and beat him. Gennady then demonstrated a more effective way to use NZT by dissolving it and injecting it directly into the bloodstream. He explained that this method worked faster and lasted longer. Eddie noticed that one of Gennady's men was blind in one eye. Without wasting time, Gennady pulled out medical tools, including a knife and pliers, intending to force Eddie to hand over more NZT. Meanwhile, Gennady's men tried to open the safe in the room. Trapped, Eddie quickly grabbed a knife and used it to fight back. A physical struggle broke out. Eddie fought with all his strength and finally managed to overpower Gennady. Lying on the floor, Eddie spotted a syringe nearby. Without hesitation, he grabbed it and injected the NZT into his body. As soon as the needle pierced his skin, the effects kicked in instantly, sharpening his mind once again. After waiting a moment, Eddie heard the footsteps of Gennady's one-eyed henchman. As the man tried to turn him over, Eddie, already prepared, sprayed the syringe into his eye, blinding him instantly. Another man who attempted to enter was met with a sudden attack from Eddie, but the fight wasn't over yet. The last remaining henchman chased Eddie down and began choking him. In the intense struggle, Eddie managed to push the blind man into the window, ultimately leading to his death. After the incident, Eddie learned that Atwood had died despite taking NZT. During his search, Eddie discovered that his lawyer had been keeping the NZT pills for himself, which Eddie eventually found in Brandt's cabinet. A few years later, while still on the run from Gennady, Eddie was contacted by Carl. Carl, who had left the Wall Street world, had now moved into the pharmaceutical business. He offered Eddie a stable supply of NZT, but Eddie firmly refused. He revealed that he no longer needed the pills. Eddie had successfully modified NZT to eliminate its side effects, and now his brain operated at full capacity. To prove his abilities, Eddie demonstrated his prediction of an upcoming van crash. Not only that, but he also sensed an issue with Carl's heart and pointed it out immediately. Worried, Carl warned Eddie, but Eddie remained confident. He declared that he would always be 10 steps ahead of everyone else.